The first thing I heard inside the Mancini palazzo was the click, metal on stone, a silver lighter opening and closing somewhere above me. It was still dark outside, the kind of Palermo dark that held salt in it from the sea and made the marble floors feel colder than they were. I stood in the servants' corridor with 2 pastry boxes balanced against my hip and tried not to notice how quiet everyone had gone. Quiet in a bakery meant sleep or grief. Quiet in a house like this meant a man had entered and no one wanted to be the first to breathe wrong. "Kitchen," the guard said. He didn't touch me. That frightened me more. I had delivered cannoli and almond biscuits to rich houses before. Old money had a smell to it, waxed wood, coffee, locked rooms, flowers that cost too much to die in vases. This place smelled like all of that layered over gun oil, expensive cologne, and night air brought in on men's coats. It smelled like power cleaned up before breakfast. I kept my chin down and followed the corridor toward the light. My father had told me once that the wealthy did not look directly at working women unless they intended to use them or ignore them. I had spent years being grateful for the second. The kitchen doors were open. One of the pastry boxes slipped in my hands when I saw the blood. Not much. A dark stain on the edge of a white counter. A broken glass near the sink. A man on his knees in the corner with his face split at the lip, 2 armed guards behind him. No one moved to clean it yet. No one moved at all. And in the doorway opposite the kitchen, framed by pale stone and the faint blue of almost morning, stood a man in a black suit with no tie and blood on one hand. Raphael Mancini. I knew him at once, the way all of Palermo knew him, without introduction, without wanting to. Some men carried their names around them like perfume. His was heavier than that. It was in the angle of every shoulder in the room, in the lowered eyes, in the fact that even the injured man in the corner was trying not to make a sound. Raphael looked at me. Not at the pastry boxes, not at my flower-marked sleeves, at me. My pulse turned strange. "Who is she?" he asked. His voice was quiet. That made everyone else in the room answer faster. "Bellini Bakery," one of the kitchen girls said. "Dawn delivery." The injured man in the corner made a choking noise. Raphael didn't look at him. He kept looking at me, and I hated how aware I became of my shoes, my hair pinned badly at the nape, the smear of powdered sugar on my wrist. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." Only that. My mouth had gone dry. He glanced at the boxes. "Set them down." I did. My fingers shook once when I opened the first lid. Pistachio cream, orange peel. The scent rose warm and sweet into a room that did not deserve it. One of the guards shifted. The man on the floor spat blood into a handkerchief. I should have left then. I knew that. I knew it in the same stupid, instinctive way I knew when sugar was 2 seconds from burning. Instead, my eyes went to Raphael's hand. The cut ran across his palm, shallow but messy, probably from the broken glass. Blood had dried at the heel of it and along one knuckle. He held it as if it were nothing. Maybe to him it was. No one moved to help him. Of course no one moved. Men like him were not helped. They were obeyed. I heard myself say, "You're bleeding." The whole room changed. Not visibly. No one gasped. No one cried out, but the silence tightened like a wire pulled between 2 buildings. Raphael looked at his own hand as if he had forgotten it existed, then back at me. And it was not invitation. It was warning. Still, I put the lid down, reached for the small scissors tucked in my apron pocket, and cut a clean strip from the hem. My hands steadied as soon as they had a task. Buttercream, sponge sugar, boiling syrup, bandaging a burn after a sugar pull gone wrong. It was all pressure, timing, movement. If you panicked, you ruined it. I stepped close enough to smell him. Bergamot, smoke, night air, something colder beneath it. My heart beat so hard I thought surely the room could hear it. He did not move when I took his hand. It was warmer than I expected. Bigger, too. Scarred in the palm, I wrapped the linen once, twice, tied it firm but not tight, and let go. I did not say sorry. I did not ask if I should have touched him. I did not ask for protection. When I looked up, his face had changed in a way I could not read. The man in the corner laughed once through blood. One of the guards hit him hard enough to shut him up. Raphael still had not looked away from me. You should go, the kitchen girl whispered. Yes, I took a step back, then another. Raphael said, she walks like a ghost. His eyes stayed on me when he spoke to the room, but the words were mine. A guard said, uncertain, boss. Raphael closed the silver lighter in his left hand. Click, let the little ghost leave the same way she came. I should have hated the name. Instead, it slid under my skin and stayed there. I left with my pulse in my throat, down the corridor. Past the silent men. Through the service door into the hour before sunrise, when Palermo belonged to delivery vans, saints, stray cats, and women trying to get home before the city remembered their names. I did not run. That mattered to me later, that I did not run. I walked down the steps, crossed the courtyard, and reached the street before something stronger than sense made me stop. I looked up. There he was. On the balcony above the eastern side of the house, one hand on the stone rail, the other lifting that silver lighter into the dark, as if he had been made to stand above cities and judge them. He was only a shape at first, then the flame lit his face. Hard mouth, still eyes, the white strip of my apron around his hand. He had watched me leave, of course he had. The sky behind him began to pale at the edges, and for one mad second, I felt as if all of Palermo had gone still with me in it. Me on the street in my cheap shoes. Him above me in a house full of armed men, and something I had not invited already moving between us. Then the flame vanished, the lighter clicked shut. I went home anyway. By sunrise, I understood one thing: he had seen me. My father was awake when I got home, which meant the night had been bad. He sat at the small kitchen table in our apartment above the bakery, with his right hand curled uselessly in his lap, and his good hand wrapped around an espresso cup gone cold. The stroke had taken only part of him, the doctor kept insisting. As if halves were generous things to lose. His mouth worked harder around words now. His face tired faster. But his eyes were the same, soft, apologetic, too kind for debt collectors and landlords and men who smiled before they broke your oven handles. You're late, he said. The bakery below us smelled of bread cooling and orange glaze. The sound of the mixers had stopped an hour earlier. I should have felt safe there. Instead, I kept hearing the lighter click. Delivery delay, I lied. He looked at my apron, at the torn hem. That was the problem with fathers, even damaged they noticed. Before he could ask, someone knocked downstairs. 3 times, not hard. Not soft, certain. I froze on the landing. My father did too. No one came to the bakery at that hour unless they wanted one of 3 things: bread, money, or trouble. The first 2 usually pretended not to be the third. I'll get it, I said. The man waiting below looked wrong inside our doorway. Too broad, too polished, too amused. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie and held a paper bag from a rival bakery in one hand like a personal insult. Terrible idea, he said, lifting the bag. Cardboard cannoli. Crime against Sicily. I stared, he grinned. Paolo Greco. I drive for Signor Mancini, which means I also carry bad news, groceries, ammunition. And occasionally emotional burdens no one pays me for. You're here for what? For you. He smiled wider when I stiffened. Professionally, Signorina, relax. If the boss wanted murder before breakfast, I wouldn't be the one sent. I get carsick around corpses. I almost shut the door in his face. He put one polished shoe over the threshold and lowered his voice. Your father owes Bruno Lattanzi 42,000 euros. Bruno has decided patience is not a Christian virtue. Signor Mancini bought the debt before dawn. My stomach turned cold. Why? Paolo's expression shifted, just enough to tell me he knew more than he intended to say. Because the boss dislikes men who mistake sick old bakers for easy sport. Also because you were in the wrong room a few hours ago. Behind me, the floorboards creaked. My father was trying to come downstairs. Paolo saw it and stepped back, suddenly respectful. He doesn't have to worry, neither do you if you listen carefully. He lifted one finger. Rule 1, you will prepare desserts for the palazzo until told otherwise. Rule 2, you do not discuss what you saw. Rule 3, when the boss tells you to come at dawn, you come at dawn. I'm not working for a gangster because he bought paper, I said. Paolo sighed as if I had disappointed him personally. No one in this city works for just one thing, Signorina. Also, for the record, I'm on a low-carb plan and all of this is stressing me into focaccia. My father appeared on the stairs, pale and furious. Leave! Paolo straightened at once. Signor Bellini, you tell your boss. I tell my boss many things, Paolo said. He hears only half of them, which is still more than most men deserve. But on this matter, there is no room. Elena comes, your debt is frozen. Bruno Latenzi stays away, that is the arrangement. Arrangement, such a lovely word for a trap. I didn't agree, I said. Paolo looked at me kindly then, which was worse than arrogance. No, but you're still alive enough to refuse. That means the boss is being polite. He set the paper bag on the counter. These are not ours. Don't eat them. If I have to suffer cheap ricotta, I'm not suffering alone. He left before I found something to throw at him. By noon, I hated myself for considering it. By 1, I hated Palermo more. By 2, I had put on a clean blouse and gone to the palazzo with a tart box in my hands and dread under my ribs. Meyer Leconti met me at the servants' entrance. Tall, silver-haired, severe enough to make priests confess out of reflex, she looked me over once and said, "You're thinner than I expected." "I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. It's a bad habit." "Come." She took me through the back corridors with brisk authority. The house was quieter in daylight, but no less dangerous. Men in dark jackets stood where architecture made escape difficult. Doors opened and closed with expensive restraint. Somewhere distant, male voices argued in Sicilian too fast for me to catch. Meyerla led me into a private kitchen larger than our entire bakery. Copper pots, marble counters, lemon branches in a blue vase. Through the windows I could see a strip of sea. "You will work here in the mornings," she said. "You will answer to me when Signor Mancini is not present, which is most of the time and never enough. Paolo will annoy you. Ignore him. Vittorio Serra will charm you." "Don't trust it," I looked at her. "You say that as if he does it often. He charms furniture if he thinks it will hold secrets." She adjusted a tray by half an inch. "And Alina, yes, if you can leave this place emotionally untouched, do it. It is cheaper." The door opened behind me. I knew it was him before I turned. The room changed the way it had changed in the dawn dark. Like sound itself moved aside to let him through. Raphael Mancini entered in a black suit this time, his left cuff fastened, his right hand bare except for the fading strip of my apron still tied around his palm. I could not stop looking at it. He noticed, of course he noticed. "Leave us," he said. Meyerla did. Paolo, who had apparently been stealing candied orange peel from a drawer, looked between us, sighed to heaven, and shuffled out murmuring, "If anyone asks." I died bravely and hungry. Then it was just us. Raphael crossed the kitchen slowly. Men like him never seemed to hurry because the world did it for them. He stopped on the other side of the counter. "You came, you bought my father's debt." "Yes, that isn't an answer. It is in Palermo." I hated how true that was. He looked at the tart box in my hands. "What did you bring?" "Pear and rosemary." "Why?" "Because rosemary is bitter if you misuse it." I set the box down harder than necessary. "And pears bruise easily." One corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, something more dangerous because it had to be restrained, almost moment one. "I was told you were quiet," he said. "I was told you were polite." Who lied first? I should not have liked that. I did anyway, and the liking felt like stepping on bad ice. He picked up the tart knife, cut a precise slice, and took one bite. He did not eat quickly. He considered. Then he set the fork down. "You see salt in the crust." "Yes, not enough to announce itself, enough to keep sweetness honest." I stared at him. "You cook?" I asked before I could stop myself. "No, then how did you?" "I pay attention." The answer landed between us and stayed there. He slid the plate back toward me. "You will work here for 2 weeks." "No," his gaze held mine. "You will. What happens after 2 weeks?" "That depends." "On what?" "Whether the men looking for something in your father's bakery find you before I do." The room went very still. "What men?" He closed the lighter in his hand. Click. "Come back at dawn tomorrow, little ghost." The way he said it was not tender, it was ownership without the vulgarity of saying so. I should have refused him. Instead, I stood there with my hands flat on cold marble, aware of the torn hem of my apron and the strip of it still wound around his hand, and understood that my normal life had not survived the morning. Not even close. "I'll be here," I said. His eyes dropped once to my mouth, then away, almost moment two. "Good," he said. "Don't leave before I tell you to." I went home knowing exactly how dangerous he was. What I did not know yet was how dangerous it would be that I came back. There are two kinds of rich houses. The first kind wants to impress strangers. The second kind wants to remind its own people who built the walls and who can bury them inside. The Mancini Palazzo was the second kind. By my third dawn in its kitchen, I knew the rhythm of it well enough to be frightened in more specific ways. The coffee arrived first, thick and black, then bread from the private oven. Then the sound of men reporting numbers in low voices somewhere beyond the breakfast room. Docks, shipments, names, debts, routes. By 6, the house divided into those who gave orders and those who pretended not to hear them. I made lemon biscuits that morning because my hands needed a task. Sugar steadied me. Butter obeyed if the room was cool enough. Egg whites, when beaten correctly, became something close to faith. "Too much zest and it turns medicinal," I told the junior kitchen girl, who was staring at me as if I had personally volunteered for martyrdom by returning. "Taste before you fold." She blinked. "I'm not allowed to taste the boss's food. You are if you want it to be good." She laughed under her breath and did it anyway. That was how Myrla found us. She stood in the doorway with a basket of linens and one raised brow. "Excellent. Corruption before sunrise." "I call it training," I said. "I call it expensive." But she set the basket down and stole one biscuit while it was still warm. "Better. I should say here that kitchens make traitors of everyone." Men could threaten and posture all they liked in the rooms beyond, but in kitchens, people told the truth with their mouths full. By the end of that first week, I knew Paolo hid contraband pistachio cream in the pantry behind cans of tomatoes. I knew Myrla had once slapped a bishop and would do it again with less guilt. I knew Matteo Rixai, the family doctor, hated cigarettes and loved chess, and disapproved of me with the weary expression of a man who had seen too many women become collateral. What I did not know was why Raphael kept me close. He did not come to the kitchen every day. That would have been easier. Predictable danger is manageable. He came when he pleased, usually without noise, and I would feel him before I saw him. The air tightening, the staff straightening, the strange awareness of my own hands. He stopped himself 3 times that week. Once when I reached over him for cinnamon and my wrist brushed his chest. His hand came up as if to steady my waist. It hovered there, heat without contact, then withdrew. Almost moment 3. Once when I burned my finger on a sugar pan and cursed it under my breath. He took my hand, put the blistered skin beneath cold water himself, and looked at my mouth for 1 second too long before stepping back like he hated the fact that he had wanted to stay. Almost moment 4, and once in the chapel corridor where I had gone by accident searching for storage. The private chapel sat in the eastern wing, all candle smoke and old gold. I had no business being there. The shelf I wanted was past it, according to one of the maids, and I had taken a wrong turn. That was my explanation when I pushed the half-open door wider and found Raphael inside, standing before the altar as if prayer and threat could be the same posture if a man was disciplined enough. He turned. The morning light caught the metal at my throat. A small silver Saint Agatha my mother had left me, always warm against my skin by midday. Raphael went still. Not the ordinary kind of still he wore like a suit. This was different, sharp, struck, his eyes fixed on the metal and did not move. "I'm sorry," I said. "I took the wrong hall." "Where did you get that?" The question came too fast. I touched the metal automatically. "My mother S. What was her name?" "Sophia Bellini." Something crossed his face and vanished before I could hold it there. "You should leave this wing," he said. "I should have." Instead I asked, "Did you know her?" His jaw tightened once. "No. He lied so calmly it took me a second to understand I had heard it. Then footsteps sounded behind me, and Vittorio Serra appeared in the corridor like a man summoned by tension itself. Elegant gray suit, silver at the temples, eyes too warm to trust. He smiled at me the way older men smile at young women when they want to look harmless. "Elena, isn't it?" he said. "Our miracle from Bellini Bakery." Myrla's warning came back at once. "Signor Serra." He looked from me to the medal at my throat, then to Raphael. The smallest thing changed in the air. "Breakfast guests in 20 minutes, Vittorio said lightly. "Unless we're confessing sins before coffee now." Raphael stepped away from the altar. "We're finished." I left because his voice said I would regret disobedience in a more personal way than punishment. Behind me, I heard the lighter click. That afternoon, I learned another edge of his world. A shipment at the harbor was hit, not stolen, tested. 2 trucks blocked, 1 driver beaten, 1 message sent in blood across the side of a container. Paolo came into the kitchen swearing about logistics and cholesterol, while Myrla handed him an ice pack like an irritated widow. "Who did it?" I asked. "Men with fathers who should have aimed lower in life," Paolo said. "Also pigeons, I blame pigeons for morale." "Pigeons? Feathered extortionists," he muttered. "They know fear, they sense weakness." "Myrla says I'm dramatic. This is slander." Myrla didn't look up from slicing fennel. "If one bird can ruin your masculinity, Paolo, it was never structurally sound." I laughed despite myself. Paolo pointed at me. "See, she understands me." "No," Myrla said. "She has manners." When he left, still muttering about carb deprivation and airborne tyranny, I found myself smiling. It felt illicit in that house. It vanished an hour later. I was carrying a tray of espresso through the West Hall when I heard voices inside Raphael's office. His door was almost shut. I should have kept walking. I stopped. "The girl's father kept records," Vittorio was saying. "Old deliveries. Sofia Bellini moved goods through the bakery before she died." "Food," Raphael said. "Sometimes, sometimes not." Silence. Then Vittorio, softer. "If the ledger still exists, others will come for it." I nearly dropped the tray. My mother, my bakery. My dead mother tied to whatever rot lived underneath this city. I backed away before the cups rattled. That night, in my room over the bakery, I pulled down the old recipe ledger my mother had bound herself in cracked blue leather. Flour-smudged pages. Lemon oil stains. Notes in the margins. Measurements only she understood when she was tired. And tucked into the back cover, folded so flat it had become part of the spine, was a page I had never seen before. Not a recipe, a list of dates. Deliveries, initials. At the bottom in my mother's hand, 1 line, "Before dawn." No one can know. When I looked up, the street outside was empty. But I knew, with the awful clarity of a trap finally visible, that I was already inside his empire. And it had been waiting for me longer than I understood. Rain changed Palermo into a city that remembered its age. The streets narrowed under it. Stone went black. Church bells sounded farther away, as if even God preferred not to get involved. By the time I reached the palazzo the next dawn, my skirt hem was wet, and my hands were cold around the blue leather ledger inside my satchel. I had not slept. I had read every page twice, hoping the list at the back would become less frightening if I could convince myself it was about flour deliveries or sugar prices or some other ordinary betrayal. It did not. There were too many initials, too many dates written like appointments with consequence. And twice, in the margins, my mother had marked a tiny cross beside the letters L.M. Lucia Mancini. I did not know that then. I only knew the ledger felt heavier than flour had any right to feel. Myrla took one look at my face and the rainwater dripping from my hem and said, "Whatever you are carrying, don't open it in the hall." She moved me into the pantry off the main kitchen. "Shut the door and turn the key from the inside." The room smelled of olive oil, oranges, and old wood. Shelves climbed to the ceiling. Glass jars caught the gray light. "What happened?" she asked. I pulled the ledger from my satchel and showed her the folded page. Her mouth thinned. "That goes to him," she said. "Who was Lucia Mancini?" Myrla looked at me for a long beat. Outside, thunder rolled over the roof. Then the latch moved. We both went still. Only one person in that house knocked once and expected walls to make way. Raphael came in with rain on his shoulders, and that impossible stillness under his skin. He looked at the ledger, then at me, then at the locked door as if he approved of it without needing to say so. Myrla held the book out. She found this. He took it. His thumb stopped on the folded page. I watched his face as he read the initials, the dates, the line at the bottom in my mother's hand. He did not flinch. He did not curse. But something in him went colder. "Leave us," he said. Myrla hesitated only long enough to touch my wrist once. Then she went. The storm deepened over the house. Rain struck the windows in hard diagonal lines. Somewhere below us, Paolo yelped, "If lightning kills me on an empty stomach, I will haunt this house selectively." Despite everything, my mouth twitched. Raphael heard it. His eyes flicked to mine. "You find him funny. I find him loud. He considers that a skill. He considers diet soda a moral burden." That almost smile again, small, quickly buried, almost moment 5. He opened the ledger on a crate of lemons and turned pages with deliberate care. "Your mother used recipe notation as code." I moved closer before I could stop myself. "You can read it." "Enough." His shoulder brushed mine, heat then restraint. The pantry suddenly felt too narrow. He tapped one entry with his finger. Flour was cash, almonds were weapons. Sugar crates covered harbor transfers. Another line. "These initials LM, they mark one route only." The Eastern Docks. Who was Lucia? For the first time since I had known him, Raphael did not answer immediately. He closed the ledger. The silver lighter appeared in his hand as if thought had summoned it. Click, open, click, shut. "My sister," he said. The word landed softly. That made it worse. "She left this house before dawn 6 years ago." The room went cold around my spine. He looked at the wall behind me rather than at my face. "She thought silence would keep the city asleep. She thought if she moved carefully enough, no one would notice." I watched her go from the east balcony. His voice thinned to something sharper than anger. "By sunrise, she was dead." I could not breathe for a second. The storm cracked white across the window. In the flash, I saw it, an old scar disappearing beneath his shirt at the collarbone, pale and ugly, as if some blade had entered him and never really left. "Did they?" "Yes." Nothing more, no speech. No offering. Just that one word and the scar and the terrible discipline it must have taken to make grief look like authority for 6 years. Then shouting broke out in the corridor. Raphael was already moving. He pushed me behind him so fast my hip hit the shelving. The pantry door burst inward on the second shove from outside. One of Bruno Latenzi's men stumbled through with a gun half raised, drenched from the rain, and stupid enough to think surprise could outrun Raphael Mancini. I did not truly understand violence until I saw how little of it he needed. Raphael caught the man's wrist, turned it once, and the gun clattered across tile. His other hand struck the throat. A hard, ugly sound. Efficient. Intimate in the worst way. The man folded. Raphael kicked the door shut behind him and drove the attacker face first into the shelf so the jars rattled above us. I flinched. He heard it. He ended it immediately. No flourish, no speech, one final movement. Silence. The pantry smelled suddenly of oranges and metal. My back was against the wall. His body blocked the doorway, my only view the dark line of his shoulder and the blood now fresh along his knuckles. He turned. I knew then what people meant when they spoke of dangerous men as if danger itself had a temperature. He looked carved out of the storm, breathing hard once, then not at all. I should have been terrified of him. I was, and something worse. "Are you hurt?" he asked. I stared at his hand instead. "Are you?" His gaze changed, there, again. That unsettled thing I had seen on the first morning. Without thinking, I reached into my satchel for the clean cloth wrapped around the ledger to keep it dry. I took his hand before he could object and pressed the linen over the broken skin. "You do this every time," he said, very quietly. "What? You see blood and choose the wound instead of the man holding it." My throat tightened. He let me bind his knuckles. He stood motionless while I tied the cloth, his breathing evening under my fingers. Outside the pantry, armed footsteps pounded past. Orders barked in Sicilian. Thunder swallowed the rest. Inside, it was just the two of us and my hands on him. His free hand lifted, paused beside my cheek, did not touch, almost moment 6. Then the house lights went out. The pantry dropped into darkness, so complete, I heard my own breath before I felt him. Raphael stepped closer, one arm bracing past my shoulder against the shelf, so nothing could fall on me if more men came through the wall. The shape of him caged me without trapping me. His chest brushed the front of my coat with each breath. "Don't move," he said, as if I could. From somewhere down the corridor, Paolo shouted, "If this is how I die, tell Myrla I loved her and her lasagna equally." A gunshot answered him. I made a sound. Raphael's hand closed lightly around the back of my neck. Not rough, not gentle either, simply certain, a warning and a comfort in the same touch. "Stay with me, little ghost." The nickname had changed by half a shade. It frightened me how much I heard it. "I'm here," I whispered. The words cost me more than they should have. His thumb moved once against the nape of my neck. Then the generator kicked in. Light flooded back. He stepped away immediately, as if closeness had been a tactical decision and nothing more. But his hand lingered on the ledger before he picked it up. "Your mother helped Lucia leave," he said. "Whether by choice or fear, I don't know yet. My mother is dead. I know." Something in his face told me he knew more than that. Raphael opened the pantry door. Men were already dragging the body away. Paolo appeared at the end of the hall, hair damp, shirt untucked, carrying a pistol in one hand and a half-eaten breadstick in the other. He pointed the breadstick at the dead man. "See, this is why low blood sugar is a strategic vulnerability." Even through the taste of fear, I laughed once. Paolo looked offended. "You mock me now, signorina, but when war comes you will remember that I wanted fettuccine and was denied." Raphael did not even glance at him. His eyes stayed on me. "You do not leave the house today," he said. "I have my father. He'll be brought here." The words should have enraged me. Instead, they landed with terrible relief. He held the ledger at his side, my cloth bright on his hand. "Don't leave again," he said, and because of the way he said it, I understood he had not meant the kitchen. He had meant the dawn. They brought my father to the palazzo before noon. Matteo Rixai supervised it himself, irritated at everyone equally, which strangely reassured me. My father hated the indignity of needing help and wore it badly. He hated being indebted to powerful men even more. By the time I reached the guest suite they had prepared, he was sitting in a high-backed chair near the window glaring at the sea, as if the sea had personally arranged all of this. "Elena," he said, trying to stand. I crossed the room and knelt beside him before he could embarrass himself. "Don't, they moved me like luggage." "Expensive luggage," Matteo said dryly from the doorway. "Try gratitude, it's anti-inflammatory," my father grunted. Matteo looked at me over his glasses. "You slept?" he asked. "No. Then do that before you start fainting at dramatic moments. This household already has enough theater." When he left, my father caught my wrist. "You found something," he said. I should have lied. Instead, I looked at his face and saw how tired truth had made him over the last 10 years. "Yes." He closed his eyes briefly. "Your mother kept records for them, not because she wanted their world, because your uncle Nico owed money and Vittorio Serra offered a way to clear it. 1 year," he said. "Just coded packages through bakery orders. No one gets hurt." His mouth twisted. "Men always say that right before blood arrives." My skin went numb. "You knew, not all of it." Shame shadowed his face. "The night of the harbor fire, your mother told me she was done. She said she had moved one girl through the bakery, and after that she would not carry another lie. She said if anything happened, I should burn the blue ledger." He looked at me helplessly. I couldn't, it was the last thing she touched. Lucia, the eastern docks, before dawn, the room swayed. A knock came before I could answer. Myrla entered carrying a tea tray and one expression too knowing for comfort. "Downstairs," she said. "Lunch for the family captains. The dessert course is yours. I'm not serving armed men after this." She set the tray down. "Then don't do it for them." Do it because Señor Sarah is attending. That moved something cold under my ribs. In the kitchen, I chose blood oranges, not because they were dramatic. Because their bitterness had to be handled exactly right, or the whole dessert failed. I made a layered semifreddo, dark chocolate base, orange cream at the center, and a thin caramel shell on top that would crack under the edge of a spoon. Paolo came in while I torched the sugar. He leaned against the doorframe, hand pressed theatrically to his stomach. I would like the record to show that I have now gone 46 hours without pasta. If I become violent, it is a medical event. You're already dramatic enough without carbs. He put a hand over his heart. Myrla said that too. Then she fed me grilled fish like I was being punished for ambition. I almost smiled. His eyes dropped to the dessert. What is that? Orange over bitter chocolate. Burnt sugar on top. What's it called? I looked at the thin glass glaze setting over the cream at the fragile shine of it. Still standing, Paolo went unexpectedly quiet. That's annoying. Why? Because now I have feelings before lunch. He left with the tray muttering, still standing, dear Lord. She's trying to kill me artistically. I thought that was the strangest part of the afternoon. It was not. I served the desserts myself because I wanted to see Vittorio Serra taste mine. The luncheon room was all pale stone and old oil paintings. Men in dark suits sat around the long table talking about container routes, as if containers had never held contraband, guns, or bodies. Raphael sat at the head, Vittorio at his right. Paolo stood near the sideboard looking one olive away from mutiny. I set the first plate before Vittorio. He smiled up at me. You have your mother's hands. The words hit like a slap. Before I could answer, I caught a scent beneath the orange and sugar. Bitter almond, tiny, buried, wrong, not from my kitchen. My head snapped toward Raphael's place setting. The espresso cup at his elbow steamed quietly. I had not poured coffee. One of the footmen had. My body moved before thought did. Don't drink that. Every head turned. I heard my own voice echo off stone. Raphael looked from my face to the cup. He did not reach for it. He did not ask why. He simply stopped. Vittorio smiled faintly. Elena, this is hardly the room for. There's cyanide in the coffee, I said, or enough bitter almond oil to hide it. No one breathed. Paolo took one flying step forward and snatched the cup away as if it had insulted his mother. Matteo was called. Guards closed the doors. Chairs scraped stone. Men shouted. Raphael remained seated. His eyes were on me. How do you know? He asked. I bake with extracts. I smell them before I taste them. Almost everyone in the room was staring now, but I felt only him. The awful steadiness of his attention. Matteo returned with a testing vial from his medical bag. The liquid clouded dark. Poison, the room ruptured. Orders, pistols drawn. 2 servants dragged out in tears. Paolo crossed himself and said to no one visible, I knew skipping lunch would end in death. Raphael rose. The whole table seemed to rearrange around that single movement. He walked toward me while chaos unfolded behind him. He stopped close enough for only me to hear him. You just saved my life. I should have stepped back. I didn't. It was the coffee, I said, because if I said anything else I might start shaking. His gaze dropped to my mouth for one heartbeat, then returned to my eyes. Almost moment 7. Come with me. He took me not to his office but to the west balcony overlooking the sea. Wind pushed rain in cold sheets across the stone. He closed the doors behind us, and for a moment the world narrowed to gulls, water, and the dark line of his body between me and the storm. My mother worked for Vittorio, I said. Your mother worked around him. His jaw tightened. That is not the same thing. You knew. I suspected. About Lucia too. He looked out at the water. I knew your mother's name before I knew yours. The confession took something out of him. I saw it happen. She helped my sister, he said, not for money. Because Lucia was afraid, and your mother was not the kind of woman who left fear unattended. After Lucia died, your mother tried to disappear. 3 months later, the harbor fire took her. His voice flattened. I was told it was an accident, but you don't believe that anymore. No. Rain blew across the balcony and dotted his suit. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed water from the edge of his collar. He went utterly still. My fingers should have left. They didn't. Almost moment 8. He caught my wrist, not hard. Elena, my name in his mouth was rougher than the storm. I thought he might kiss me. He let go instead. Restraint. Again, deliberate enough to hurt. Inside the room, the doors opened. Paolo appeared, pale and indignant. Good news, bad news, and medium sad fish. Which first? Raffles' face closed. Talk, he said. Paolo swallowed. The servant who poured the coffee is dead in the scullery. Needle in the neck. So unless our footmen have become very decisive, someone cleaned the problem before we could ask questions. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Because betrayal inside a house like that did not begin with servants. It began above them. War announced itself in pieces. A missing truck. A burned warehouse in Trapani. One Mancini soldier found in an alley with his ring finger removed and returned in an envelope. Palermo did not wake one morning and decide it was at war. It simply began to smell of smoke more often and to fall quiet too fast whenever certain cars stopped at lights. By the 3rd day after the poison, Raphael moved my father and me to a safe house above an abandoned citrus cannery outside the city. Meyerla came too, because apparently no one was willing to survive on masculine logistics alone. Paolo drove us there complaining about road conditions, processed meat, and the spiritual violence of dry salad. If this place doesn't have proper bread, he said, hauling in luggage, I will defect on principle. To whom? Meyerla asked. Your metabolism, he sighed toward the ceiling. You wound me because you know I cannot leave you. Her mouth twitched. That was on Meyerla the equivalent of poetry. The safe house smelled of dust, sea salt, and old peel. The windows were high. The floors were concrete. Armed men guarded every entrance. But at night, I still heard the distant groan of ships in the harbor and thought of my mother writing coded deliveries under recipe notes while I slept in the room above her bakery. I made a mistake on the 2nd night, not because I was stupid, because I was tired and angry and wanted 1 hour in which my life did not belong to men with guns. There was a pay phone at the end of the service lane. I went after dark to call my aunt in Naples and tell her to take my father if anything happened. I left a note for Meyerla. I did everything except tell Raphael. He found me halfway back. His car lights cut across the lane first. Then the black sedan stopped hard enough to spit gravel. He was out before the engine died. I had never seen him lose composure. I still had not, but I saw what sat beneath it. He crossed the lane in 4 strides and caught my upper arms. Where did you go? The question came low, controlled, murderous around the edges. To call my aunt. In the dark, alone. I left a note. For Meyerla. Not for me. The distinction struck harder than it should have. I didn't realize I needed permission to breathe. No, he said. Only to disappear. The lane held moonlight in broken strips between cypress shadows. I could smell cold iron from the fence. His hands were still on my arms, not painful, inescapable. I wasn't running, his jaw flexed. You don't get to decide what it looked like to me. I opened my mouth to fight him, then headlights flared at the far bend. Raphael's head snapped up. Everything after that happened too fast to belong to memory. Down, he said. He threw me behind the stone trough by the lane just as the first shot shattered the pay phone. Glass sprayed across gravel. Men spilled from the dark. Raphael drew and fired twice before I had fully hit the ground. The sound was enormous. The world narrowed to concrete, gunpowder, his body over mine, the pressure of his hand at the back of my head forcing me lower whenever I tried to look. Men shouted in Sicilian. One screamed. Another went silent. Somewhere closer than thought metal struck stone. I tasted dust. Then someone came around the side wall. I saw the muzzle first. I screamed his name. Raphael turned into the shot instead of away from it. The bullet tore his shoulder, spun him, and he still killed the man before he hit one knee. Something inside me broke loose. I grabbed the fallen attacker's pistol because no one had ever properly taught me not to freeze except life itself. I did not think. I aimed where motion was and fired once. The recoil slammed through my wrist. A man dropped near the gate. When it was over, the lane smelled of blood and citrus leaves crushed under boots. Raphael was on his feet somehow, but his shirt had gone black at the shoulder. He stared at the gun in my hand, then at me, as if I had become someone new in the space of 1 minute. "Give me that," he said. I did. My hands started shaking only after. He took 1 step toward me and nearly fell. The rest of the night happened behind a window with shutters closed. Matteo extracted the bullet at the kitchen table while I held the tray of instruments because my hands were steadier when occupied. Raphael sat shirtless, jaw locked, blood running down his ribs. The old scar at his collarbone disappeared under newer damage. The silver lighter lay beside the whiskey glass untouched. "He should be unconscious," Matteo muttered. "He's too stubborn," Paolo said from the doorway. "If death comes for him, it will need an appointment." "Get out," Matteo and Myrla said together. After the wound was stitched and bandaged, everyone left except me. I don't know why they did. Maybe because houses at war develop their own instincts. Maybe because they had all seen the way he looked at me when he thought I was not seeing him. He sat near the window in the dim kitchen, shirt open, one hand braced on his thigh. Moonlight touched the edge of his face. I stood by the sink with the basin of bloody water and could not make myself move farther away. "You should sleep," I said. "So should you." Neither of us did. The lighter clicked once in the silence. "I shot someone," I whispered. "Yes." The word came without comfort and without judgment, just truth. "I didn't know if I hit him." "You did." Something in my chest tightened painfully. "I'm not made for this." His gaze lifted to me. "No. You're not." I waited for him to say that was why I should leave. He said, "That's why it matters." I stared at him. He looked back toward the dark window. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, lower, closer to the bone. Raphael, he had watched her in a room full of blood and she had reached for cloth. He had watched her smell poison through orange sugar. He had watched her on a gravel lane with a gun shaking in her hands after screaming his name like it could hold him in the world. It was never her face that undid him. It was that she met the wound first, every time, as if what was broken mattered more to her than what could break her. He shut the thought down before it became prayer. I crossed the room before I understood I had chosen to. He watched me come, did not move. I stopped between his knees and held up the clean strip of linen Matteo had left on the table. "Your bandage is bleeding through." His mouth moved once, the shape of a laugh without sound. "Of course it is." "May I?" He nodded. My fingers touched the hot edge of his skin. He sucked in one breath and went still. I cleaned the blood carefully, retied the dressing, aware of everything I should not be noticing. The scar over his ribs, the controlled strength in his shoulders. The way his hands gripped the chair only when I got too close to pain. When I finished, I did not step away quickly enough. He lifted one hand and tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. Nothing more. That tiny touch felt larger than the gunfire. "I thought you were dead," I said, because it cost too much not to. His thumb lingered against my temple. "Little ghost, I know what you are," I whispered. "That is what scared me." Something broke across his face then, not openly, but enough. He stood too fast for caution and then stopped himself, both hands framing my face without claiming it. "If I kiss you now," he said, voice roughened by pain and restraint, "you'll mistake survival for something gentler." "Maybe I won't." He shut his eyes once. Then he bent and put his forehead against mine. No kiss, no speech, just that. It was more intimate than anything I had imagined. Almost became real and stayed there, trembling. When he drew back, his voice was barely sound. "War is here." This time, I believed it down to my bones. War made routines obscene. Coffee is still brewed. Sheets still dried on lines in the hidden courtyard behind the safe house. Paolo still complained that canned tuna was an act of aggression. But now, every ordinary thing happened under the knowledge that men were circling one another across Palermo, with instructions already loaded into guns. I entered the week believing I could remain beside it without belonging to it. That illusion ended on a Tuesday. My father had begun to recover enough speech to argue with everyone, which I took as a blessing until he demanded to be returned to the bakery. "I built it," he said. I won't die in a stranger's hideout. You're not dying anywhere, I told him. Optimism, Paolo said from the doorway, is very beautiful on women and fools. Myrla smacked the back of his head with a folded newspaper. Raphael came in before the complaint finished forming on Paolo's face. That was another war habit, rooms breaking around his entrances. He looked tired in the way only very dangerous men could look tired. Cleaner, quieter, more exact. His shoulder was bandaged under black silk. His silver lighter turned once between his fingers. There's a car to Naples at dusk, he said to my father. I stared. What? It will take Gianni to your aunt. New papers, new accounts. He can stay until this ends. My father gripped the arm of his chair. And Alina, the room changed around the question. Raphael looked at me. She can go too. No one spoke. I had imagined him ordering, keeping, deciding for me. I had not prepared for choice. When? I asked. Tonight. Paolo exhaled through his nose. Myrla's face revealed nothing. My father closed his eyes in simple relief. I should have felt the same. Instead, something opened under my ribs and would not close again. By afternoon, the safe house had become unbearable. Men moved too quickly. Phones rang and stopped. Matteo arrived with a split lip. He told no one how it happened. Myrla packed my father's medicine in silence. Paolo found time, somehow, to iron his own shirt while lamenting that if he died in wrinkled cotton, his ghost would refuse closure. Then the gates exploded. Not metaphorically, not poetically. With enough force to bend iron inward and throw 2 guards across the courtyard stones. Sound vanished under the blast and returned in pieces. Shouting, gunfire, the high broken cry of one of the maids, my father trying to stand, Myrla swearing like a dockworker. Raphael shoved me behind the stone stairwell and turned toward the courtyard at the exact moment Paolo went down. He did not fall theatrically. That was what made it frightening. 1 second he was there, weapon out, face set in comic indignation. The next he folded against the wall with blood soaking through his side. Paolo! I moved before anyone could stop me. Bullets hit the column near my head, stone dust stinging my cheek. Matteo grabbed my coat. I tore free anyway. Paolo's eyes were open, shocky, humiliated. This is inconvenient, he gasped, even then. Even then, I dropped to my knees beside him. Press here. I would prefer pasta, he said weakly. I laughed and cried at the same time. My hands were slick with his blood. Matteo reached us and took over with hard, professional efficiency. Across the courtyard, Raphael was pure violence now, economical, terrifying, giving orders between shots as if he were rearranging furniture. Then Myrla screamed. I turned. One of the attackers had made it inside. He had Myrla by the throat, gun at her temple, dragging her backward toward the broken gate. Raphael stopped moving. The whole courtyard felt it. Drop it, the man shouted. Now, he meant Raphael's weapon. He meant submission. He meant to make witness out of all of us. And Raphael, who did not explain himself, who did not apologize, who did not bow, lowered the gun half an inch because Myrla mattered. I saw the opening before the gunman did. On the overturned supply cart beside me sat 3 jars from the kitchen delivery, blood orange syrup, preserved cherries, and industrial sugar alcohol for the pastry burners. Glass. Wait. Reach. I seized the alcohol jar and threw it, not at his head. At the lantern bracket above him, the jar shattered, liquid splashed, flame raced down the wall in one hungry sheet. The man jerked in reflex. Myrla bit his hand and dropped. Raphael fired once. Clean. Final. The courtyard roared with smoke and men and orders. Matteo and 2 guards carried Paolo inside. Myrla, shaken and white around the mouth, slapped my face lightly with one flour-cold hand. For making me worry, she said, and then she pulled me into the briefest embrace of my life. By sunset, the safe house smelled of antiseptic and burned citrus. Paolo lived. Barely. Matteo said the bullet missed anything vital by the grace of saints and inappropriate optimism. He asked for pasta while I stitched him, Matteo said. I considered letting him die on principle. I visited Paolo only once before dusk. He lay propped up in the infirmary room, pale as paper, still handsome enough to resent it. Myrla cried over me, he whispered. She was angry. She dabbed my forehead with holy water. That was saline. His eyes closed in dreamy satisfaction. Love wears many disguises. I almost smiled. Then I went to the garage. The car to Naples was waiting. My father sat in the back seat, frightened and trying not to show it. A small suitcase rested beside him, new papers in a brown envelope. My old life, reduced to what one man's network could smuggle beyond the city by night. I could leave. The thought stood in front of me plain as a door. No one blocked it. Raphael was not there. That mattered more than it should have. He had given me what I had demanded in every argument I never voiced, a choice untouched by force. I took one step toward the car. Then I looked past it toward the broken gate, the scorched wall, the blood washed badly from stone. Toward the house where Paolo had nearly died laughing, where Myrla had been pulled at gunpoint, where my mother's ledger had started tearing open old graves. If I left, I would keep my innocence only in the shallowest sense. I would keep my hands clean by letting everyone else bleed around the truth. My father saw it happen on my face. "Elena," he said softly. I leaned into the car and kissed his forehead. "Go to Aunt Teresa." His fingers closed around mine. "And you?" The answer cost me the future I had been carrying since I was 14, a bakery upstairs, a good man someday, a life made small enough to be safe. "I'm going back." His eyes filled. Not with approval, with understanding. That was harder to bear. When I shut the car door, I left something of myself inside with him. I watched the taillights disappear down the lane. Then I turned and walked back into the house of a man who had offered me freedom and frightened me more by doing so. At the top of the steps, Raphael was waiting. He said nothing. Neither did I. I walked past him into the dark with my eyes open. After I chose to stay, no one treated me gently. That was its own kind of respect. Myrla handed me household keys as if they weighed nothing. Matteo began telling me the truth about wounds instead of edited versions suitable for women. Paolo, stitched and furious, asked whether my return meant I would finally smuggle him proper noodles. Even Raphael stopped using soft lies where hard facts would do. "Vittorio is missing," he said the morning after my father left. We were in the old kitchen at the safe house. The windows stood open to let out the smell of bleach. I was tempering chocolate because anger needed boundaries and a thermometer. His shoulder was bound. He looked more dangerous when injured, not less. "Missing," I repeated, "or gone." Gone. That one word closed the fast mystery and opened the slower one wider than I wanted. My mother's ledger, Lucia's escape, the poison, the ambushes, it had all begun to align around one man with silver at his temples and too much charm in his smile. "You trusted him," I said. Raphael's mouth flattened. "I was raised by him after my father died. Mirror, father, betrayal. I saw all of it then, even if he would not say it aloud. And now I find him." He left before I could ask what that would cost. I made the mistake that undid the next 2 days before noon. Matteo asked for the ledger because he wanted to photograph the coded pages and send them through secure channels to a judge outside Sicily. Insurance, he called it, if we all ended up dead. He was practical enough that I handed it over without thinking. He left it for 20 minutes on the infirmary desk while stitching a guard's arm. 20 minutes was enough. When he returned, the ledger was gone. So was the spare phone he used for secure calls. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when they realize disaster has chosen them specifically. "I locked the door," Matteo said. "Who has keys?" I asked. He answered with his expression, "Too many people." By evening, we found the first body, a guard in the storage shed, dead 3 hours. Needle in the neck, same as the servant at the palazzo. By nightfall, I was taken, not dramatically, not from a ballroom or church steps or while screaming his name into rain. I was lifted out of the back corridor with chloroform and a hand over my mouth while carrying soup to Paolo's room. When I woke, the first thing I smelled was sugar. Burnt and old and clinging to brick. I was in an abandoned confectionery on the Palermo waterfront. Copper kettles, cold ovens, broken molds hanging like saints with their faces chipped off. My hands were tied in front of me with linen strips. That detail chilled me more than rope would have. Someone with a sense of theater had chosen the gesture well. Vittorio Serra stood by the window. He had removed his jacket. In shirt sleeves, he looked younger and infinitely worse. Men are harder to excuse when they are comfortable. "Elena," he said. I hoped we could speak before Raphael made everything vulgar. I sat up slowly on the flour-dusted floor. "You burned my mother." He inclined his head as if I had solved a puzzle on schedule. "Your mother insisted on conscience. Conscience is wasteful in our line of work." My stomach turned so violently I thought I might be sick. "You killed Lucia too." He was silent for a beat. Lucia was going to break Raphael in ways I could not allow. She loved a weak man and wanted to run toward weakness with our enemies at her heels. I chose the family over her. The city over sentiment. My hands went cold. There it was, the thing Raphael feared becoming, a man who called amputation leadership. "You loved him," I said. Vittorio smiled without warmth. "As much as I was made to. And this is what that love looks like. This," he said, stepping closer, "is what protection looks like when one has the courage to finish it." His eyes moved over me not with hunger, but with assessment. That was somehow more violating. "He is softer because of you," Vittorio said. "He waited too long to cut out the weakness. I thought perhaps if he watched you die, he would remember who he must be." I thought of Lucia, of my mother, of the pay-phone lane, of Paolo bleeding into my hands. Something in me stopped being merely afraid. "Then you don't know him at all," I said. His expression changed. "Barely, enough." He nodded toward the work table. The ledger lay there beside a tray of pastries from my own recipe book. My vision swam. "You see," he said, "even now your talent serves other men." These were meant for his table tomorrow. I looked closer. The glaze was too glossy, the almond note too sweet. Poison again. Hidden better this time. My skill arrived in me like muscle memory. "That batch is unstable." Vittorio paused. "What? You use too much oil to mask the bitterness. Heat it and the scent blooms." I stared at him. "Your men carrying it won't make it through the checkpoint kitchen if Paolo is breathing. He smells dessert before he smells sin." For the first time, Vittorio looked irritated. "Good." He came closer, crouched, and touched the metal at my throat. "Your mother wore this when she lied. Did you know that?" I jerked away. He backhanded me lightly, not rage, correction. I tasted blood. Then he made his mistake. He ordered one of his men to retie my wrists to the chair in the back kitchen while he took a call. The back kitchen still had a working sugar burner and 3 clean saucepans laid out for finishing the poisoned glaze. Men who underestimate women often do it in practical ways. They leave tools nearby because they cannot imagine those tools becoming weapons. I listened, waited, counted footsteps, then I reached. A sugar cook's hands are not delicate things. Mine had been burned and blistered and steadied over bubbling syrup for years. I hooked the nearest saucepan with my foot, dragged it close, and worked the tied linen against the hot metal ring until it smoked. Pain bit first, then freedom. By the time the door opened again, I had the burner lit and 1 pan of sugar going amber. The first man through the door laughed. The second never had time. I flung the boiling syrup into the first one's face and hit the second with the empty pan hard enough to hear Bone complain. He went down. I ran, not because running had ever saved anyone I loved. Because motion was the only prayer left. I made it to the outer room before Vittorio caught my hair and spun me hard enough to send stars through my vision. He held me upright with one hand and looked almost sad. "You see," he said, "this is what women like your mother mistake for agency, noise before the ending." He dragged me toward the window. Outside, down on the black ribbon of Harbor Road, engines screamed closer. Vittorio smiled for the first time like a man. "Listen," he said. "That will be him." The edge of Too Late opened under my feet. The first shot broke the window behind Vittorio's head. Glass exploded inward. He swore and shoved me down. I hit the floor on one shoulder and rolled under the work table as men surged into the front room yelling. Through chair legs and flour dust I saw boots, muzzle flashes, shards of sugar molds kicking across the tiles. I did not wait to be rescued. That mattered. It matters still. Vittorio's dropped pistol had skidded beneath the stove. I reached for it at the same moment. One of his men lunged around the tablecloth to drag me out by the ankle. I fired from the floor, half blind, the shot taking him high in the chest. Warm blood sprayed my hand. I gagged and kept moving. Then a body hit the tiles above me with enough force to shake the table. Silence, briefly, not true silence, the kind made of everyone else deciding not to breathe while one man enters a room. I crawled out and looked up. Raphael stood in the broken doorway with two of his men behind him and murder worn as neatly as a suit. Blood darkened his bandage where the old shoulder wound had reopened. His gun hung low at his side. His face when he saw me was not relief. It was something rower. I stood too fast. He crossed the room in 3 strides and hauled me against him so hard the breath left my lungs. One hand at the back of my head, one across my spine. The reunion had no elegance in it. No pretty lines. I pressed my face into his shirt and felt him shake once before he mastered it. "Are you hurt?" "I don't know." He pulled back just enough to look at me, blood at my lip. Flour on my cheek, rope burns at my wrists. His jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth click, then Vittorio laughed. It came from the corner near the smashed window where he had taken cover behind a steel workbench. Calm, educated, infuriating. "There," he said, "that face. I remember it from your father." Raphael went still in my hands. "Don't," I whispered. He did not move. Vittorio rose slowly, weapon in hand but lowered, as if the room were a negotiation instead of a slaughterhouse with sugar on the floor. "You were so easy to teach," Vittorio said. "Control, sacrifice, distance. I gave you the spine to hold this city, and now look. A baker's daughter and a dead sister later, you've finally become sentimental." Raphael handed me his spare pistol without taking his eyes off Vittorio. That trust landed deeper than a vow. "Stay behind me," he said. I did not. I moved sideways instead, enough to see the angle of the room, the hanging copper pot above Vittorio's left shoulder, the slick of spilled syrup he had not noticed near his heel. Vittorio kept talking because men who believe themselves right mistake speech for power. "Your sister would have ruined you. Sofia Bellini would have exposed us. I removed weaknesses. That is the difference between us, Raphael. I finish what love makes messy." "No," Raphael said. It was the quietest thing in the room. Vittorio smiled faintly. "No, you call fear discipline." Raphael took one step forward. "You call mutilation protection. You killed my sister because she chose badly and my city because you thought you were the only man fit to hold it." "And you?" Vittorio asked. "What are you now?" Raphael's answer never came. "Because Paolo, of all impossible people, chose that moment to appear in the doorway behind the soldiers holding his side, and carrying an assault rifle with the offended dignity of a man forced to work during recovery. He took one look at the room and said, "I leave bed rest for 20 minutes and suddenly we're hosting the devil in a pastry shop." Vittorio's attention flicked. That was enough. I fired at the copper pot above his shoulder. The chain snapped. The pot slammed down against the workbench. Vittorio jerked back, heels skidding in the syrup slick. Raphael shot the gun from his hand and crossed the room before it hit the tiles. He did not kill him there. That would have been mercy. Instead, he drove Vittorio to his knees and forced him to look at me. "Tell her," Raphael said. Vittorio laughed blood. "Tell her what?" "That her mother screamed your sister's name before the fire took her. That Gianni Bellini begged. That I let him live because widowers are useful when they're broken." My knees nearly gave. Raphael hit him once. Not wild, precise, devastating. Then Matteo and the others dragged Vittorio upright in restraints, because even in that room, even then, the final reckoning belonged somewhere more fitting than a candy factory. I thought it would happen immediately. It didn't. Outside in the harbor wind, I finally started shaking in earnest. Paolo offered me his coat and nearly fainted from the effort. "You're supposed to be in bed," I said. "And miss this? Never. Also, Myrla threatened to salt my wounds if I died without apologizing for the pantry cheese inventory. I have obligations. I laughed once, ugly and grateful. Then I cried where everyone could see. Raphael stood in front of me and did not tell me to stop. He only waited until I could breathe again, then lifted my scraped wrists in his hands and looked at the raw red marks there as if they were more unbearable than his own injuries. He touched you, he said. It was not a question, I nodded. His face emptied out, I caught his sleeve. Don't become him. The words hurt to say because I was asking a violent man not to use the thing violence had already made of him. He covered my hand with his. For you, he said, and the vow in it frightened me more than the promise of blood ever could. I am trying. That night he sat outside my door instead of inside my room. I knew because I heard the silver lighter click once every hour and never the scrape of a chair moving away. Near dawn, when the sky had just begun to pale, I opened the door. He looked up from the corridor wall where he had been resting his head. He did not stand. I sat beside him on the floor. Neither of us spoke. After a while, I leaned into his shoulder. He turned his face into my hair and breathed once, like a man relearning oxygen. The final villain had a face now. The old father had become the enemy. The city had chosen its side. And for the first time, I knew one of us might not survive the choice. The last battle began where the first ghost had been made. Eastern Docks. Before dawn, the ledger gave us the route. My mother's codes, Vittorio's habits, old delivery windows disguised as flower shipments and citrus crates. He had built an escape corridor for years using the same pattern she once helped Lucia cross. Men like him always believed their intelligence made them original. Mostly it made them repetitive. We moved in darkness thick with salt and diesel. I wore black because everyone else did, and because blood shows less. Paolo objected to my shoes, my posture, and the fact that war apparently did not pause to let him recover properly. If I rip my stitches saving the Republic, he muttered while checking his magazine, I expect a parade and unrestricted gnocchi. There is no Republic, Matteo said. Then a casserole. Raphael ignored them both. He stood beside the van studying the dock lights with the dangerous stillness I had come to recognize as the last moment before action. His silver lighter turned once in his hand, clicked shut, disappeared. I went to him before anyone could stop me. You said we fight as a unit, I said quietly. His eyes met mine. That does not mean I place you where bullets fall. It means I'm already there and you know it. Wind whipped strands of hair across my mouth. He tucked them back with 2 fingers and let his hand stay for one breath too long. Almost still, even now. Then he said, Stay with Paolo and Matteo until I signal. If anything shifts, you go to the warehouse office. Not the road, the office. I nodded. He looked at me as if storing the sight away against disaster. Little Ghost. The name had warmth in it now, but also fear. I touched the bandage hidden beneath his coat where the shoulder wound still hadn't healed right. Come back. His mouth moved once, the shape of a promise he did not trust himself to say. The operation went wrong in under 4 minutes. Vittorio had left decoys in the container yard and snipers on the crane platforms. The first wave took 2 of our men before anyone saw muzzle flash. Paolo shoved me behind a stack of pallets hard enough to bruise and fired upward, while cursing every saint responsible for poor urban planning. Matteo dragged a wounded guard into cover and started compressing a chest wound with calm hands already red. Across the dock, Raphael advanced like knight given a weapon. I saw Vittorio only once at first, gray coat near the old customs office, men closing around him. Then smoke from a flash charge swallowed the lane. Office, Paolo shouted. I ran because I had finally learned that obedience and choice were not always enemies. Inside the warehouse office, old manifests littered the floor. A radio hissed from the desk. Through the cracked glass, I could see the eastern berth where Lucia had died and where Vittorio meant perhaps to end Raphael too. Then I smelled it. Gasoline, not outside, inside the office walls. A trap, fire after gunfire. My mother again. I found the line in seconds, a crude spill under the back stairs leading to the catwalk above the berth. He meant to drive anyone seeking height into a furnace. And then I understood something else. If ignited, the fire would trap Raphael's men between containers and water. I grabbed the radio. Catwalks primed to burn, Eastern Berth, pull them back. Static. Then Paolo's incredulous voice, why are you in the office and doing strategy? This is profoundly unattractive behavior in a woman I respect. Paolo, right, pulling back. I took the maintenance extinguisher from the wall and ran up the stairs anyway. At the top, Vittorio's last courier was already there with a flare in hand. He saw me and smiled in brief, ugly triumph. You again. I threw the extinguisher like a brick. It hit his chest, knocked the flare wide, and sent both of us crashing against the railing. The flare rolled sputtering toward the gasoline trail. I lunged, caught it with my coat, and burned my palm clean through the fabric before smothering the spark. The courier hit me hard across the face. I stumbled, tasted blood, and drove my knee upward on instinct. He folded. We slammed into the railing together. Below, on the berth, Raphael looked up at the exact moment I shoved the man over. He dropped 10 feet onto a container roof with a sound I will not forget. The dock froze around it. Then Vittorio laughed from the customs office doorway. Of course, he called. She climbs into the fire for you. Raphael moved toward him. This time no one could interrupt. I made it down the stairs in time to hear the last of it. You should have let me make you clean, Vittorio said, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Love makes rulers weak. Raphael stopped 2 paces away. Dawn was beginning behind him, turning the sea into hammered silver. No, he said, it makes men visible. Vittorio's smile faltered. You taught me to remove anything that could hurt me, Raphael went on. So I became a man no one could reach. You called that strength. His gaze cut once toward me, then back. She reached anyway. Vittorio lifted his weapon. I shouted. Raphael fired first. The shot echoed across the water and seemed to wake every gull in Palermo. Vittorio staggered backward, looked almost surprised, and collapsed against the berth where Lucia's route had ended 6 years before. No speeches followed. No victory cry. Only waves striking pilings and men lowering guns one by one as the truth of survival arrived too slowly to feel like joy. Raphael stood very still. Then he walked to where Vittorio lay and closed the dead man's eyes with 2 fingers. A son's gesture, a judge's, a grave's. The cost of winning settled over him like age. We lost 3 men that morning. 1 more died in Matteo's hands before the ambulances could be bribed into silence. Paolo dislocated his shoulder and announced this was proof that loyalty was physically degrading. Meyerla, when we returned, slapped every living person in range and then made coffee strong enough to count as medical intervention. By full daylight, the docks had been washed, the witnesses paid, the bodies named. Raphael found me alone on the west terrace of the palazzo just after sunset. Palermo glowed below us as if cities ever learned shame. His shirt sleeve was torn. There was blood on his cuff that wasn't his. I looked at him and saw all the men he had been and all the one he had refused to become. He came close. I touched his face with my burned hand. He took it carefully, as if the pain belonged to him. It is over, he said. I believed him because he sounded emptied by the truth of it. War did not end cleanly. It ended administratively. Phones stopped ringing at impossible hours. Men who had spent years being brave in packs remembered wives and school fees and the benefits of breathing. Lawyers emerged. Priests were seen entering side doors. Containers began arriving on time again. Palermo exhaled through clenched teeth and called it peace. My father came back from Naples in late October. He cried when he saw me in the bakery kitchen and pretended it was flour in his eyes. His left side was stronger. His laugh returned first, then his appetite, then his irritation with anyone who handled dough incorrectly. We reopened the Bellini shop 3 weeks later under protection no one named aloud but everyone understood. A discreet guard across the street. A new alarm. Deliveries checked twice. Windows reinforced in ways that still made me angry when I thought too hard about what safety meant now. Raphael never stood behind the counter. He knew better than to turn sweetness into intimidation. But some mornings, before the city fully woke, I would look up from the pastry table and see him on the opposite balcony of the apartment above the shop, one hand on the rail. That silver lighter clicking softly in the dark, while he watched the street and pretended he was not also watching me. The sound no longer frightened me. That disturbed me more than fear ever had. Paolo recovered slowly and complained magnificently. He arrived at the bakery on his first day, out of bandages, wearing a sling, and the expression of a saint martyred by poor hospitality. "If you do not make me something involving cream, I will tell everyone you abandoned me emotionally," he declared. "You're alive because Matteo and I kept pressure on your wound, and yet all I remember is hunger." Myrla entered behind him carrying fresh basil and said, "What you remember is your own voice." He put a hand over his heart. "Cruelty from the woman I intend to marry." She did not look up, then proposed to someone with lower standards. He beamed at me. "Did you hear that?" She said standards, not no. Somehow, against every instinct war should have trained into us, warmth kept surviving in small, rude pieces. It was Raphael who struggled with peace the most. Not publicly. Publicly he became colder, if anything, more exact. The city respected a boss who won and then did not celebrate, but in private I saw the cost of what it had taken to kill Vittorio. The long silences, the nights on the balcony, the way his hand sometimes went to the old scar at his collarbone when he thought no one noticed. One evening in November, I found him in the Palazzo Chapel. I had gone there searching for Myrla because Paolo had hidden imported truffle oil behind the votive candles, for security reasons, and everyone blamed everyone else. Raphael stood in the same place I had first seen him months before the altar, hands at his sides. This time I did not apologize for entering. He heard me anyway. "You're bleeding," I said. He looked down as if mildly surprised. A thin cut crossed his knuckle where he had apparently shattered one glass too many in silence. I reached into my apron pocket on instinct. Clean linen. Always now, when I took his hand, his eyes closed briefly. "Do you know," he said, voice low in the candle smoke, "what it does to me when you do that?" My throat tightened. "No, you never ask what I deserve before you decide I'm hurt." The chapel seemed to still around the words. There it was again, the why of me. The thing I had done in blood and panic and never understood as fully as he had. I tied the cloth around his hand. "I'm not brave," I whispered. "No," he said. "You're kinder than bravery." That was somehow worse. I looked at him and saw the man from the balcony and the pantry and the lane and the dock all at once. The man who had stopped himself for me more times than I could count. The man who had offered me escape and feared me leaving more than bullets. The man whose world had remade mine without asking, and who had still, somehow, left me enough self to choose him consciously. So I did. I touched his jaw with my flour-dusted fingers and said the most dangerous thing I had ever said in my life. "If you ask me carefully," I whispered, "I think I could stay everywhere." He went absolutely still. Then, with a restraint that felt like reverence, he bent and kissed me. No desperation this time. No blood or gunpowder between us. Just warmth earned the hard way. His mouth moved slowly, giving me time to turn away if I wanted. I didn't. My hands found his coat, then the line of his neck. He made one broken sound against my lips and stopped, forehead resting to mine. "Carefully," he said. Yes. When he kissed me again, I felt the whole cruel architecture of us settle into something human. Later, on the west terrace with coffee cooling untouched between us, he set a small dark box on the table. I stared at it. "It isn't fairy tale timing," he said. "You don't do fairy tales." "No," his mouth shifted slightly. "And this is not innocence, I know that." His hand covered the box but did not push it toward me yet. "If you take what's inside, you take my name publicly. My enemies, my city, the fact that some mornings I will still wake angry at ghosts. I can promise protection, honesty where I have it. Restraint where I can. I cannot promise clean hands." I looked at the box, at his hand over it, at the man asking like power had not taught him he could take. "What if I don't want clean hands anymore?" I asked quietly. Pain flashed across his face and turned into something gentler. He opened the box. The ring was old Sicilian work, gold with tiny orange blossoms etched into the band. Not flashy, not a trophy. Something chosen by a man who had watched me frost cakes at dawn and understood that beauty did not have to shout to be expensive. I had it remade from my mother, he said. She wore orange blossoms the day she married my father. Lucia was meant to have it after. His voice thinned just once. Then I thought no one would. He slid the ring onto my finger with hands steadier than mine. I looked up. What does this make me? His gaze held mine, warm now where it had once been cold enough to mark territory. It makes you mine once, he said softly, and only because you chose it first. The first use, the only one that mattered. I laughed through tears, because there was no graceful way to survive that sentence. Below us, from the kitchen window, Paolo's voice floated up. Myrla, if you salt the eggplant while angry, the bitterness wins, Myrla answered. Then perhaps it deserves to. Raphael looked toward the sound and impossibly smiled. When he looked back at me, he touched the ring once. Little ghost, he said, and the name had become home. By the time the church bells rang 9, the coffee was cold, the city was ordinary for a single blessed hour, and I had chosen exactly where I would stand when darkness came back. With him. 9 months later, the bakery belonged to morning again, not safely. I had stopped using that word as if it were a room one could lock, but steadily, honestly. The old ovens breathed heat into the walls before sunrise. Butter softened on the counter. Apricots blushed in crates by the back door. My father argued with suppliers over almonds, as if men had never died for lesser commodities. Upstairs, our apartment smelled of coffee and linen, and the faint bergamot trace Raphael carried home on his coats. Home. I still felt the strangeness of that word some days. I wore his ring under pastry gloves until I could slide it back into the light. He kept his guns where I knew about them, and not 1 inch closer than necessary to the kitchen table. We had learned each other in practical ways. I left him espresso before dawn when port trouble kept him out too late. He checked the alley before opening the bakery shutters every morning, and pretended it was habit rather than devotion. Paolo and Myrla had not married, which to Paolo was a cruel abuse of narrative structure. She loves me, he informed me while stealing candied orange peel from the cooling rack. She is simply approaching the revelation in an avant-garde way. Myrla, carrying ledgers from the storeroom, said, If you touch one more peel, I will approach your funeral traditionally. He sighed to heaven. You see, passion. Even my father laughed. The city had not become good because I loved a dangerous man. It had become legible. That was different. I knew now which silences meant weather and which meant blood. I knew the sound of Raphael's car in the lane below. I knew the exact temperature of his moods from the way he set down his keys. I knew that when his silver lighter clicked on the balcony at 4 a.m, it no longer meant he was watching for a woman to disappear. It meant he was making sure she had already come home. The full-circle moment arrived on a Sunday before dawn. Rain had fallen in the night, soft and steady. The bakery windows fogged with oven heat. I was in the upstairs kitchen tying a fresh apron when I heard the click of the lighter from the balcony outside our bedroom. Metal, flame, shut. I stepped out with my hair half-pinned and found him there in shirt sleeves, one hand braced on the rail, the city still blue with not yet morning. In the lighter's flame, his face was older than the first time I had seen it, and kinder in ways only I was allowed to know. You're awake early, I said. He looked over his shoulder. You were missing. I was in the kitchen. Only possessive still, just quieter. I moved closer and saw the problem at once. A fresh cut crossed the base of his thumb, not serious, stupid, domestic. He had sliced it, opening a wooden crate of vanilla pods I'd ordered from Catania. I laughed softly. The great terror of Palermo. Defeated by packaging, he looked at his hand as if it had betrayed him personally. Say nothing to Paolo. Impossible. I love joy too much. Then I did what I had done at the beginning, and what apparently I would do until one of us was buried and the other still reached instinctively for cloth. I took the clean strip tucked through my apron tie, tore it free, and wrapped his hand. No trembling now, no room full of armed men, no dead stranger cooling the floor. Just dawn, rainwater on the stone, and the man I had chosen watching me with that same strange stillness he had worn the first time. "Do you know," he said quietly, "that you still do it exactly the same way?" I tied the knot. "Bandage your bad decisions." His mouth curved. "See the wound before the weapon." The words settled between us with all 12 months behind them. I looked up, and there it was, the bookend, the answer, the whole dangerous tenderness of us. In Chapter 1, if lives had chapters then, he had watched me leave before dawn in silence and thought silence was loss. Now he watched me stay before dawn in silence and understood it as love. I touched the old scar at his collarbone, through the cotton of his shirt. "And you still pretend you're harder to love than you are. That's because I am. That's because you were." His eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, the city behind him had begun to pale. He lifted my hand to his mouth and kissed the ring first, then the flower dust on my knuckles. "Little ghost," he said. The name held no possession now that I had not already given. It held history. Terror survived, all the almosts, the dock, the chapel, the pantry dark. The fact that he had stopped himself until stopping meant something. The fact that when he finally hadn't, it had been because both of us had chosen the same fall. Inside, downstairs, my father banged a tray for no reason except mourning. Paolo was laughing at something Myrla pretended not to say. The ovens breathed. The street below was ordinary enough to be miraculous. Raphael clicked the lighter once more, not for a cigarette. Not for nerves. He turned and used the flame to light the small balcony candle I kept in a blue glass jar against drafts. It glowed between us in the pale air, ridiculous and warm. Same sound. Completely different life. When I first heard that silver lighter click, it meant I had been noticed by a man I did not understand in a world I never wanted. Now it meant the opposite of fear. It meant he was here. It meant Dawn had found us both alive. I leaned into him, my cheek against his shoulder, and together we watched Palermo wake in pieces. The bakery shutters below, the wet street catching light, a pigeon landing on the opposite ledge. Paolo's horrified voice rose from downstairs. "Absolutely not. Remove it. Myrla, that bird is looking at me with criminal intent." Myrla answered, calm as prayer. "It's eating your biscotti. Even wildlife knows you're weak." I laughed into Raphael's shirt. He went still for one heartbeat, then bent his head and kissed my hair the way some men cross themselves. That, more than anything, still undid me. I used to think watching someone leave before dawn was the cruelest thing God could make a man survive, he said quietly. I lifted my face to his. "And now?" I asked. His thumb brushed the knot of linen at his hand, my knot, fresh and white against old scars. "Now I know the bravest thing is watching her stay. There are loves that arrive like fire. Ours did not. Ours arrived like silence, like a wound bound before it was understood, like a city still dangerous and a life built anyway. I chose him with full knowledge. He loved me without asking innocence to survive unchanged. And in the end, the most radical thing either of us ever did was ordinary. We stayed. Below us, the ovens breathed warm air into the morning. The candle flickered blue and gold between us. His lighter rested silent in his pocket. My ring caught the first clean edge of sun. And when he said my name one last time, "Little ghost," it no longer sounded like a warning. It sounded like home. Would you have chosen Raphael and accepted the blood that came with loving him, or would you have left before dawn and never looked back?